Welcome to the UWANTGAME podcast. I'm your host, Corey Brotherton. What is UWANTGAME, you might ask? Well, UWANTGAME has helped many high school student athletes reach their potential in academics and athletics, as well as personal growth through life skills and career development. The program pairs student athletes with former college student athletes who have traveled the same path. In addition to that, there are speaker series and seminars where professionals from various backgrounds are brought in to speak to student athletes and to give them a look at the game behind the game. The speaker series is designed to inspire high school student athletes to develop into lifelong leaders. The UWANTGAME Scholarship Fund awards leadership scholarships to deserving high school students. Go to uwantgame.org for more information on the organization. Today on the UWANTGAME podcast, we have Coach Larry McKenzie. Coach McKenzie is a six-time Minnesota Boys State Championship coach. He is also an author, educator, and speaker. In 2014, Coach McKenzie became the first African-American coach selected to the Minnesota Basketball Hall of Fame. Coach McKenzie, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
How's everything out there in Minnesota?
You know what? Actually, right now, pretty good. Starting to warm up. So hopefully the real spring is around the corner. And as soon as this pandemic lets us out, we'll be able to enjoy some of the short spring, summer weather that we get in Minnesota.
Absolutely. So how did everything end as far as your season? And tell us how that wound up with the pandemic coming through and you having to cut everything short.
Yeah. So, we had our last practice and I was just reflecting on this today. We were preparing to play in the section semifinals, which we were the number one seed and favored to get through. We're pretty confident. We were 24-6 during the season, so we had played a very competitive schedule. Thought we were playing well, and we're sitting in a meeting about 10 a.m. Got a phone call that I needed to hurry to the school right away. That it had been announced that everything was being canceled. So rushed over, talked to our guys. So, it's just like somebody pushed the pause button and all of a sudden the season was just over.
Very unfortunate. But hopefully everything will be back to normal here in the fall and you guys can pick up where you left off. But so basically UWANTGAME, what we do is we have guests on the podcast that were former college student athletes, high school athletes, kind of how they transition from being an athlete to what they're doing now. And you're a very successful coach in Minnesota. Like we mentioned in the bio, you're in the Hall of Fame. You've won several state championships, but just give us a little background about you. Where are you from and what was it like growing up in your hometown?
So I grew up in Miami, Florida. I'm the oldest of four kids. Interesting enough, both of my parents were educators. My dad also worked for Dade County Park and Rec, and so he was a recreational coach and stuff on the park. So been around the game of basketball since I was 8 years old. I was blessed to have an uncle, Stan McKenzie, who played in the NBA for 10 years. Played with the Baltimore Bullets, Phoenix Suns, Portland Trail Blazers, and finished his career with the Houston Rockets. So I was around the game a lot, played my high school basketball at Miami Beach Senior High. And I always tell people, the interesting thing is Larry McKenzie probably could have never played for Coach McKenzie. Was a pretty talented kid, but wasn't, just due to some things that was going on in the household and some of those kind of challenges that I had. I wasn't very coachable. Was talented enough. I was talented enough that coach had to play me. But I'll be honest about it. I was one of those kids. I practiced when I wanted to practice. And it was just a situation, like I said, I was good enough that the coach had to put me out there, for games. But I wasn't the type of kid that could have played for Coach McKenzie.
So you're from Miami and you wind up going to Minnesota. How does that? That's a big weather difference. Right?
Yeah. So again, so what happened? Interesting enough, and I was sharing this with my kids a few weeks ago. When I go back and look at my scrapbook, I was being recruited by some small Division I schools around the country. But every time that call came in, my coach would, just being honest, great athlete, score, just good basketball player, and that but was, he can be hard to coach, like to do things the way he want to do things. And so just because of some of those negatives, I ended up at a small NAIA school at the time in a small town, River Falls, Wisconsin. So that's 35 miles outside of the metro area here in Minnesota, outside of the Twin Cities. And so, and I took a lot of those same bad habits with me from high school to over there. And so me and the coach had a hard time getting along. So after about my, after 2 years in, I basically decided to hang it up and just was a student and finished school and went on to some other kinds of things. Okay. Never thought and in my wildest dreams, I never ever thought that I would be in education or coaching at all.
Right. So who were some of the mentors that you may have had in high school and college? Do you have anyone to help you make these decisions or not?
You know what, and that's funny. Because I always kind of reflect on that, with both of my parents being educators, but they didn't push me one way or another in terms of that direction. But I was blessed at 19 when I got to college. I met a gentleman by the name of John K. Cameron. And John had, I am who I am today because of my mentor, John K. Cameron. I got involved with a college fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. John was our advisor. And I always say, out of all the guys that was around during that time, 25, 30 guys, for some reason, he picked me out of that crowd. And so he just began to pour in my life. And I'm telling you, from the way that I talk, one of the things I always remembered that he gave me to start dealing with my anger, he told me, one, you want to, start to take a deep breath, and then you repeat that, those that the gods wish to destroy first they made angry, that I needed to learn to process and think, before I got angry, instead of jumping to actions and always being ready to fight. I was one of those kids, you know what I'm saying? You look at me the wrong way, you know what I'm saying? I was ready to go at you. And so, so I got in the habit of doing that. He influenced the way that I dressed, just things that I got involved in. And I tell people, a lot of what I do and why I am the way I am today is because John Cameron, he became the godfather to my kids, but he would never took a gift for Christmas, never took a gift for Father's Day, never allowed for me to pay for lunch or dinner. And the thing that he would always say to me was, the only thing that I ever want from you is that when the time comes, I want you to allow others to stand on your shoulders the way that you stood on mine. And he would say that to me often. And I tell people that really changed my life, because as I grew and I matured, a lot of what I've done and accomplished has been about paying him back.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What was your major in college?
Political science major. So I thought when I was 14 and 15, my plan was to go to law school, and I wanted to be a U.S. senator. But, stuff happens, got married, kids, and some of those things. Yeah.
Now talking about college, we want to mentor a lot of the college athletes, high school athletes, and you stopped playing basketball in college, but you were part of a fraternity. How important was being in something else other than sports to you in college?
Well, so the thing is, I kept playing. I got involved. We had a very, very organized. So all of the guys that kind of fell into the same category, that old saying, misery loves company. So we had a very good men's league team. So we got involved playing in the city, traveling around, across the country, playing all over Wisconsin, Chicago, that kind of stuff. But the fraternity was just about, it was family. It was one of those things where when you talk about really having some older guys who had also had some similar experience to share into my life, to be able to talk to be able to talk about some of the challenges. And I think the biggest thing is, the biggest discovery in terms of being a fraternity is sometimes sitting around with people is oftentimes we think we're the only ones dealing with some of the problems and challenges that we have in life. And so being able to sit around with like-minded guys and find out, that I wasn't by myself. You know what I'm saying? That some of the challenges that I'd had in my life, some of these guys had went through as well. And then to see them have been able to navigate those challenges and still be successful. A lot of those guys, and they're educators now, businessmen and all. Like I said, I met some of the most brilliant Black men that in the world during that course of time, and so that influenced me quite a bit.
Right. Awesome. So college, you're in Wisconsin, from Miami to Wisconsin. What happens next in your life?
So one of the things is growing up in Miami, and I grew up during a time, I left Miami right as the drug lords was coming in from Colombia, from Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of drugs, and it was during that Scarface area. And so I did not want to go back and raise a family in Miami. And I always say the thing that attracted me to Minneapolis at the time is I thought I called it a big country town. So it wasn't quite the city that it is now. And so a little slower pace. And I just thought it would be a great place for me to raise my family. But the other part of it is I have to be real honest. I've always found Minnesota, and I always say it's like Star Trek. The thing about Minnesota is, as a man of color, it's a place where you can go where no other man of color has gone before. Mm-hmm. So when you think about it, in 2014, I become the first African American, coach in history of Minnesota, 100 plus years of basketball to go into the Hall of Fame. If I was in Houston or Dallas or Philly or other places, that would be a little bit different. So I found it as a place, as long as I was taking care of my business, there was a lot of opportunity here. And so that's why I decided to, call Minnesota home.
And so tell us about how you wound up getting into education. You talk about you not being not necessarily the best student or the best, most coachable, but here you are wanting to get into education and becoming a coach.
So here's the kicker and the next thing, and it'll go into how I actually got into coaching. So right out of college, I had a big brother, a good friend of mine who played for the University of Minnesota by the name of Clyde Turner. And Clyde was also one of my mentors. And so Clyde had been on me while I was in school. And as soon as I graduated, Clyde just kept, pestering me about getting involved with Big Brothers. And that was the organization that he worked for. And I was like, man, at 21, how much influence, impact can you really have? So long story short, I got involved as a big brother for a 13-year-old young man from a single family household. And one day, this young man by the name of Jules, he's walking through his school building, and somehow he overhears that his school did not have anybody that wanted to volunteer to coach his basketball team. Mm-hmm. So Jules, being wise beyond his years, he volunteered his coach, his big brother, to coach the team. And so I always tell people I got involved with coaching through Jules, expecting to impact the life of a 13-year-old young man. And because of Jules, my life was forever changed. Wow. So I coached Jules, fell in love with it. And then I just found myself every weekend. I was, always mentoring other young men, being around it. And at the time, I was working for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, fast tracking, making a great living. But literally every Sunday, 6 o'clock, I used to get a headache. I love the paychecks, but I hated the job. Mm. And one day I got a call from a friend of mine who says, I'm starting a school and I want you to come over and work with the young men, and from a mentoring aspect. And so I got involved with that, fell in love with it, and I've actually been on the education side now for the last 21 years.
Wow. Amazing. So just from being a big brother and helping one, you wind up helping hundreds, maybe thousands of students.
Yeah, well, like I said, absolutely. Volunteering to become a big brother, expecting to change the life of a 13-year-old young man, changed my life. And like I said, I fell in love with coaching, and it forever impacted me.
Right. How much has coaching and the game changed in the past 20 years as you've been a coach?
Oh, so first of all, obviously 20 years ago, you was not, you didn't put everything that you said or did, on social media. So there
Right.
was no Facebook, Instagram, any of those kind of things. So, back then, and it's interesting because being old school and coming to a different era, what you said in the locker room stayed in the locker room. Now everything is instantly out there. It's the kids, no matter how much talent they have, you couldn't become what I call the Facebook star or Instagram star or any of those kind of things. So the game has changed quite a bit. I'll tell you then, and a major difference for me when I got into coaching, I was coaching at an inner city high school. For all practical purposes, a lot of single moms, and so they would basically say, "Coach, here's my son. You take him, and you got him for 4 years." And so there wasn't anyone wanting to have meetings about playing time or any of those kinds of things. And basically, it was old school, probably the way you was raised and played. Like if coach say do it, you do it. Now, you can win a game, you can by 60 points, and somebody want to know why did my kid only get one shot? You know what I'm saying? All of those kind of things. Something you have to be extremely careful because you may be having a conversation and somebody's filming from the stands, and just because of your actions, somebody take that out of out of context, and then that's showing up on social media somewhere. Like for example, the thing with Tom Izzo, you know what I'm saying? Been around Tom Izzo and know the love and how much he invests in his players, and then you see that 1 minute 60-second kind of thing going on with him and a player, and that just goes viral and becomes a lot more to it. So you didn't have to worry about.
And we're talking about when he pulled the player's shirt. Is that what he did?
Yeah. When he got up in his face and
right.
pulled, and again, if you think about it, like guys, there's a lot of guys. John Chaney, Big John,
right.
Bobby Knight. Those guys couldn't make it in this era.
No.
they couldn't make it. You know what I'm saying? They couldn't make it in this era. So you have to be, and I always say it's funny because a lot of times, like my former players, they'll come back, and I invite my former players to come back and talk to the kid, and they'll be like, "Coach, you're getting soft." And I'm saying, no, it's just a different time and era. If I said the things to these kids that I said to y'all, or or did some of the stuff, I'd be on the front page of the paper and I'd be fired.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's a much different time and era.
So you mentioned earlier that you couldn't have played for you. Just tell us what type of coach you are and what that means.
Well, when I say I couldn't play, because Coach McKenzie, he believes in high accountability. So, just in terms of, being places on time. If you step into the gym, the expectation is 100%. You know what I'm saying? I believe that that the coaches are the voices in the gym. So, you don't debate. I'm not debating kids or any of those kind of things. Nobody's, and I've had kids in my career that I've let go of the team because they thought they were bigger than the team. And at a time in my career, in high school, I could see myself being that kid. Literally, coach would be like, walk in, and I would never, and this is my high school coach would be like, "Hey, Mac, you feel like you want to go today?" Or, you know what I'm saying? So if I didn't feel, I might go and do some individual work, get some shots up, work on free throws. You know what I'm saying? But that didn't take me out of the lineup. And so I would never allow that kind of behavior on my team at all.
Right. Sounds like you were only doing what you were allowed to do, where now being a coach, very strict, and that's probably why you've been so successful.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and I think I say it's funny how God worked in terms of, as I look back on all of that, he actually prepared me to coach the kind of kids
Wow.
that I was.
Yep.
And so therefore, because I also know the consequences of my choices, you know what I'm saying? Of all of those kind of things, I guess I'm a little bit more, and I would use the word strict, but more so I hold my kids a lot more accountable than he probably held me. I mean, and I also have to say this too. I mean, I grew up, I went to school down south during a different time. My coach wasn't the same complexion as me. And so the difference is, and I tell my kids all the time, I know as an African American man what's waiting for them on the other side. And so a lot of what I do is approaching it from that perspective as well.
Right. Right. So, I read something about the school that you're at now, was almost shut down, and then you came in and kind of changed everything with the athletics program, and the numbers have risen. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, yeah. So I mean, the school was on a virtual closing. I mean, when I took the job, there were
And this
68
is North High School.
Minneapolis North High School. Right.
Okay.
Yep. The school board had voted, had made a decision to close. Some alumni fought to keep it open. With some stipulations that we're gonna keep the school open, but you're gonna have to get enrollment up again and get it going. And so, we came in, we were brought in because of the work that we had done at some other schools, and again with a system of accountability, making sure kids go to class, and we were able to win. We were able to win, and obviously, a lot of kids saw what we were doing, sending kids to college, those kind of things, and so kids started to come back to the community, and so in over the last 5 years, we've grown from that 68 kids to now around 500 kids, continuing to grow.
Wow. That's spectacular. That's unbelievable. So let's talk about you being an author and also a speaker.
Yeah.
How did you get into that, being a coach and now writing books and going and speaking in front of companies?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do, I mean, I just think, we'll start with the book. So one of the things that was on my bucket list for years was to write a book, and I put it off and put it off. And so it's been probably about 7 years ago now that I finished my first book called Basketball, So Much More Than Just a Game. And so it was two parts to that. I wanted to write something because I had so many moms who, all of a sudden they had this athlete that had a whole lot of talent, and they really didn't know what to do about it. They really didn't understand the game. So I wanted to have something simple for kids and single moms. And so I wrote my first book titled Basketball, So Much More Than Just a Game. And I'll give you just a real quick commercial. But the B just talks about that it is a business. You know what I'm saying? And a scholarship is an investment, and coaches respect return on investment. And so we need to be aware of that it's a business at every level. And I don't care whether you start at third grade, but somebody's selling something. And so you want to understand that it is a business. And the A is learning to appreciate the people in your life. And so when I talked about some of my challenges in high school, I always tell people that I grew up in a single parent household. And I say that is that my mom and dad was there, but my dad always worked 3 jobs. And so he was absent at a lot of my basketball games and all of those kind of things. And so a lot of what I carried, that anger that I carried on the inside, was about that. Even though I had probably everything that I wanted, the fact that he wasn't there, you know what I'm saying? It just created some anger and some other things. And then the other thing I'll tell people, at the time, my dad drank a lot, and so that was a challenge for me. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand what it was like until I got older to be a black man in the era that he was. And when I say that is, one of the stories that I remember vividly is when I was about 10 years old, walking downtown Miami, looking into a window in Woolworth, and the sign said "No color allowed." And I'm looking at my dad as an educated black man with a pocket full of money and not being able to take his kids, in to get something to eat. And at the time, obviously growing up, that didn't resonate with me at the time. But as I got older, I just thought about all the trauma and stuff that must have created inside for him. You know what I'm saying? But because of and not being able to communicate those things to me, he was doing the best thing that he knew how, was providing for his kids in a manner, you know what I'm saying, that he knew how. So the A is about learning to appreciate the people in your life. And I tell people, as I got older, we became very close, spending time with him. But all of the times that I think that perhaps because I wasn't in the right frame of mind, that I missed the opportunity to say thank you. And so the importance of saying thank you to the people that are making sacrifices in our life. S is being a student athlete. K is knowledge of the game. E is enjoying the moment. And what I tell young people is, don't be in a hurry to get grown, right? Because when you become an adult, it comes with responsibility. And that some of those responsibilities are letters in the mail every day that are bills where people want money. So, enjoy the moment. The T is teachable / coachable. The B is learning to believe in yourself. And I always say, you think about the coach that called Michael Jordan in as a sophomore and just told him he wasn't good enough to make the team, right? And at that time, Michael had a choice. He could have accepted that, right, and went on and played baseball or done something else, and we'd have never been talking about Michael Jordan. But instead, by believing in itself, we know the rest of that story. So it's important, no matter what people say, to believe in yourself. The A is attitude determines altitude. And I always like to leave this. I'm sure Joe may have shared this with you, but one of the things that I live by every day is my creed. And I'll share this with you that goes like this. And so I teach my kids this. The A is, this is the beginning of a new day. God has given me this day to use as I will. I can waste it or use it for good. For what I do today is important. I'm exchanging a day of my life for I, Larry McKenzie, must decide good or bad, gain or loss, success or failure, in order that I will never regret the price that I paid for it. And so one of the things is I always tell people what I've learned is through that creed is nobody can make me have a bad day. And so your attitude determines your altitude. And then lastly, live to love and love to live. And so it's a 10-chapter book about basketball. And it's those life lessons that the game has taught me. So that is the book. And a lot of when I go out to share, basically what I'm doing is I'm taking different part of that book. And I may be talking about, instead of, around basketball, we'll talk about being a business and the importance of your brand. Mm-hmm. And right now, all, kids don't understand. You are a brand. And, before that coach calls you, before, any kind of face-to-face contact, he's Googling you, right? He's going on your Facebook, going on your Twitter, going on your Instagram. And so it's important that you understand how to manage your brand. And so I enjoy that. And I also think, one of the things about the game, and it's interesting, even in this time and era, as athletes and as former athletes, and this is probably my own personal bias, but I think those of us who have played sports are probably handling this time, this challenging time a lot different than most people, because we're used to making adjustments all the time, right? You come out, you thought you were gonna be running your man offense. You got to switch to zone real quick, right? And you got to be prepared for when that happens, right? You got to the scouting report said number 23 was he couldn't shoot. Well, he just knocked down 3 straight threes. You got to make an adjustment. And so I just think, being a former athlete, we're taught and prepared to handle adversity, right? And so I think probably, right now, probably one of the greatest things that's helping me get through this is being a former athlete and a coach. because I'm used to making, quick adjustments on the fly.
Right.
And so I think sports, and what we learn from sports, impact nonprofit organizations, corporations, and so we have some things that we can share. You know what I'm saying? All those other intangibles that it teaches us in life. And I don't care if you're a salesman, right? If you're a salesman, I mean, you got to learn how to handle winning and losing, because every sales call you make is not going to be a win. And so, but being a former athlete, being a coach, it teaches you those things. So that's a lot about the book and about going out and speaking to organizations, corporations, and et cetera.
That's awesome. Very good, Coach. Just before we go, a couple more questions, but what's your ultimate goal for your basketball program every year?
You know what I'm saying? So we start out, I mean, the goal never changes. I mean, so I always tell kids the first thing we want to do is we want to be conference champs, right? Then we play a crossover game with St. Paul, and it's a Twin City championship. We want to win Twin City championship. We want to be section champ, state champ. But more importantly, I want my kids to graduate. And I've been blessed, and I know it's the man above. I've been blessed. In 21 years, 100% of my kids have graduated, and 100% of my kids have gone to a 2-year or 4-year school. So ultimately, it's about developing the whole kid. I want my kids, and I guess a better way to answer your questions is, I want my kids to be champions, not just on the hardwood, but in the classroom, in the community, and in their families.
That's awesome, Coach. Well, I appreciate your time, Coach. We could go on forever, but we definitely have to have a part 2 and get you back on again. I wish you and your family much love out there, and stay safe in your quarantine. That's all our time today. We'd like to thank Coach Larry McKenzie for joining us. Please shout out your website and your social media.
Okay, if you want to, my website is www.coachmckenzie.com, and McKenzie is spelled McKenzie. On Facebook, I am Larry McKenzie. Twitter, Coach McKenzie. Instagram, Coach McKenzie. LinkedIn, Larry McKenzie. So you can find me on all of the social media platforms. And again, if you want to find the book or interested in speaking, www.coachmckenzie.com.
All right. Thank you, Coach McKenzie. We'd love to hear from you. Please visit UWANTGAME.org and let us know how we can help you today. Please also follow our movement and join the conversation at UWANTGAME. That's UWANTGAME on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Until next time, I'm your host, Corey Brotherton.